Welcome everybody to this webinar. Just a little bit of background here. This is the first of a number of webinars we'll be doing with the intention of sharing Specialty Coffee Association research. So, and of all different kinds of research. Our goal is to make people aware and give people more information about resources that they have available to them through the Specialty Coffee Association. And we realize that these are really valuable resources, but lots of people don't know that they exist or don't know how to put them into context. So the purpose of these webinars is to share in depth an individual piece of research and discuss it with the people that know it the best. So it's great that everyone's here. And so it's my pleasure to introduce this piece of research and the people who are behind it. So this particular piece of research came out of the Specialty Coffee Association. Yeah, that was one of the two organizations that came together to form the Specialty Coffee Association. And SCA had a partnership, which has now continued with the Specialty Coffee Association, with the University of Copenhagen and its food science department and its business school. So connected with that is Mr. Morten Münchow. Morten, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Also here is Heather Ward, Market Research Manager for the Specialty Coffee Association. And she's going to talk a little bit about an overview of the research team, and what some of the outcomes were. So take it away, Heather.
Thank you, Peter. Hello, everyone. So it's so great to discuss this research. I'm really excited. And I just want to start out with kind of a background questions that were asked to initiate the research, and really was thinking through, personal preferences differ among consumers, and we really recognize that. And there's also different factors that influence purchasing decisions when it comes to coffee. So a factor that may or may not be considered is the power of the brand. Larger multinational chains, they invest large amounts of money into researching, strengthening that brand, protecting it, all with the intention of keeping their customers loyal to them. But how important is the brand effect in specialty coffee industry? And if we judge coffee primarily on taste alone, does it actually matter? So in an effort to shed light on this area, Imane, the main researcher, decided to investigate the role of brand effect in a behavioral study of consumer preferences towards 4 coffee chain brands in the Danish market. And the objective was to explore the effect of brand equity and customer motivations that led to choosing one particular brand of coffee over another brand. So the study was made up of sensory marketing and neuro-scientific measurement methods. The sample size, there was 122 randomly chosen participants, ages 20 to 40 years of age. It was equally distributed between males and females, and all of the respondents lived in Denmark. So I want to take a moment to cover the theory of wanting versus liking systems, because we're going to reference that throughout this. And in recent developments in neuroscience have found that motivation can be a conscious and also an unconscious response. So both of these have proven to have distinctively different neural pathways. And you can see in this picture here, the conscious, also known as the liking system, you can see at the bottom in the orbital frontal cortex. And then and that's the green, and then above in the red is the wanting system. So this is unconscious at the striatum. So with that in mind, the study was put together in 3 different steps. First was measuring brand preconceptions, and these results were what represented the consumer's liking estimations. The second was measuring the amount of coffee consumed from the samples, and that represented the consumer's wanting estimations. And then the third step was the final measurement of sample coffee consumed and preference. So that would represent the relationship between the wanting versus liking estimations. So before they did the experiment, there were some study expectations. First, two main study expectations. The first, consumers' preconceptions will connect to their final brand of choice. And then the second is that they will prefer the taste of the coffee they liked consciously and consume more unconscious of the high quality versus the low quality. So what did this look like exactly? The respondents were presented with 4 different labeled brands of coffee. They were very known brands in Denmark, coffee chain brands, and they were presented as 4 different brands in front of them. But in actuality, there were only 2 different types of coffee, and they were, for the first 2 were high quality, and the second were low quality. They were roasted the same by the same roaster, but they were just different quality of coffees presented. So the respondents thought that they were the brands, but in reality, they weren't. So this gives a visual of what the coffee tasting test looked like. So each coffee sample is measured into equal quantities, and then the international and 3 national brand samples were arranged on the table in front of them, and each respondent tasted 1 cup at a time. And each respondent evaluated 1 cup at a time. And then once they were finished tasting, any leftovers were measured. So what did they find? The study shows that there is more actually to taste preference than just taste alone. Through the sensory and statistical analysis, Imane was able to find a clear correlation between the level of brand equity and the consumer preferences. The motivations, responses, and taste experiences were actually greatly influenced by the brand expectation and assumptions. So just to show a few different graphs, the first one, the tasting test perception versus brand by quality. You can see here the green is the high quality, the red is the low quality coffee, and these are the 4 different brands of coffee. And the 2 that had higher brand equity were in the first column and the third column. So you can see they're less affected by the quality difference than the other 2. And then looking at this graph, consumption versus brand by quality. Again, the high brand equity suppliers, the first column and the third column, are less affected by the quality difference. The high brand equity suppliers were consumed more than of the lower brand equity suppliers. And also you can see the high quality coffee is consumed in the high brand equity. Still the high and low, green and red. So to kind of wrap this up and put some context in this, in conclusion, the findings explored how coffee brands in general have an effect on consumer taste. It was discovered that the Danish consumer taste experience and preferences are extremely affected by their primary expectations of the brand, their assumptions and relations. If the study allows smaller shops to examine their consumer likings and positive associations so that they can assess which values they need to maintain or further develop in order to compete with more dominant international coffee brands. And that was an exact quote from Imane in the research. So I kind of want to pass it over to Morten. Morten was the supervisor on this research from beginning to end. Morten, do you have anything you want to ask before we get into questions and discussion? Any more further insights?
No, it's I think it was a really great review. One thing that I'm not sure if was mentioned, but you could see on the slide that actually it was the low quality that was preferred. over the high quality for the when there was a big difference. And that was one of the things that really stood out as a surprise, that the consumers preferred the low quality of the two. So that I just wanted to make sure that that point was also clear, because that was what.
Heather, why don't you go back to that slide, because that is an part. Yeah, it's here, right, Morten?
Yeah, the red graphs you can see are much higher for the two low brand equity coffee brands. Not coffees, because it's, you know, high and low quality behind the brand, but for the two brands with low brand equity, the lowest scored much higher than the high quality, which was really, you know, at best interesting, but also a bit disappointing, right, for a specialty coffee person. And that was really what has, so this study was the study that really inspired the other studies we've done, because this was really a weird result that we then have repeated in two completely other contexts, still with Danish consumers in later studies. So I just wanted to make sure that that point was also clear.
And then and so what this means, I mean, it's a confusing result, right, to a specialty coffee person who thinks that, you know, people, you know, perceiving things in the cup are going to be able to distinguish good quality from low quality, or going to be able to assign values to it. And what this really shows is that people's brand perception and the equity of that brand completely influences their perceptions of what the quality of the flavors that they're perceiving. Is that right?
Yeah, in this study, yes, and yes, for sure. But it shows that, but also that people actually have a preference for the low quality, these particular customers, and that's what inspired the other study we did at the train station, where we had 209 people who also had a preference, showed a preference for the low quality. So we replicated this result, and that was led to the article that we published in the British Food Journal that says quality doesn't sell itself. And this is a really interesting point for us as a specialty coffee community. It's not a bad, you know, it's not bad news as such. It just shows that we need to be much more aware of not just thinking that high quality sells itself, but also really be prepared to understand our consumers much better, and not just assume that if we do better, it will sell better from a quality perspective.
Right, and then this work really points to brand perception as a key element of that.
Yeah.
I know I had the question, when we're talking about low quality and high quality in these studies, what were you using as your low quality coffee and your high quality coffee?
Yeah, this is probably the weakest aspect of the study, and we might have done a bit more work on that if we should do the same. This was also what the peer review process in the British Food Journal gave us the hardest time. So what we did basically was we took coffee from a local specialty coffee roastery who also has a commodity range under a different brand. And they have very systematically bought the green coffee to price differentiate these two segments. So the one is really high quality, and without this coffee the high quality was chosen not to be extremely acidic. So it was not a question if people liked acidity or not. It was actually a medium roast pulp natural, and then the low quality was just a significantly cheaper green coffee. And then I can just hear the questions from the American audience that, you know, what did they score on the SCA protocol? And this is a new thing for us it's not something that we at this time, it's 3 years ago, that wasn't a protocol that was standard procedure here in Copenhagen. So that wasn't, we didn't consider to use that as a protocol, which would have made sense to do. So we didn't do that, and we do not in the article. It's probably better explained, but this is the kind of short answer I have to that question.
Great. Thanks, Morten. Anybody in the audience, if you have any questions, you can type them in and I will see them. Oh, okay, here's one from Steve Lee, and I'll ask it. It sounds like it's a question for Morten. Do you think that a preference for lower quality coffee is a preference for familiarity and comfort?
Yes, it is. Because I have challenged the sensory scientists to understand this result, and this is exactly what their hypothesis, that it's more about familiarity, and they've done a lot of studies about that. They call it complexity. So there's only so far you can take somebody in increased complexity in a food substance without the preference to fall for more complexity. That's shown in different studies. So that's how they explain it, and we wanted to explore this a bit more in the study at the train station, where we actually asked people if they could. They got 2 cups, and then we asked them if they could guess which one was the most expensive and which one was the cheapest, as an indirect way of asking for quality. And then out of the people who correctly pointed out the high quality as the high quality, 50% of those, they still preferred the low quality. And so they were actually aware that the higher quality was higher quality, but they just liked it better, the low quality. And that was, when I asked people with experience in analyzing these kinds of results, the answer was that it was explained by familiarity, which is interesting because that points to how we can shift this as a specialty coffee community, that we just need to take our products close enough to take out the familiarity trigger at the consumer, but then we can still move them a bit, just a bit, increase the complexity a bit, and then still, as long as it's within the familiarity horizon, we can still shift them. And this, if we just take a lot of small steps, then we can move them.
Great. Here's a question from Spencer. Did the research categorize the difference between respondents who were familiar and unfamiliar to brands presented? And then the second part, did the data capture if the respondents were customers of the brands and who were not customers of the brands tested?
No, all of the brands are known by, it would really be few people who would know these 4 brands for sure. So I don't think it would make sense to stratify the population into those. And to be honest, I would have to go back to look in the protocol to see if the last question was asked. I can do that as we speak, but I can't answer that just from the hip.
Great. Okay, Andrea Bolaños asks, most of the market is not educated to perceiving quality in coffee. How do you think we can start to educate them to value quality coffee and not the over-roasted or tasteless coffees they are used to?
I think I already answered that in the previous question. Take them close enough to their horizon of familiarity, but far enough to also have an element of novelty. And then just be patient and have, do a lot of small steps to move them all the time.
Yeah, I would add to that too. I agree with everything you said. In my evaluation of all this data. I mean, this is one study that is part of a lot of consumer research, and that we've done not only in Europe, also in the United States, everywhere. And this result is very familiar to us. But one thing, and one of the reasons why we chose this research to focus on today is it points to one very clear thing that all specialty coffee companies can do, which is invest in the brand perception. And so Morten has been sort of talking about familiarity, and that's really important in building trust. And it's what I see in this data is clearly, you know, consumers were made able to enjoy not only, I mean, there's this result about seeing liking the low quality, you know, better than the high quality. There's that, but there's also the clear thing that people like coffee better overall when they trust the brand more. So you can see, Heather, if you can go to the other slide. Yeah, here you can see that in both of these studies, one of the things that they saw was that the international brand was liked and consumed more by the customers, and that seems to indicate that those consumers had a higher level of trust for or they thought there was something about the international brand that they had preconceived positive notions about, which increased their liking of the coffee and the amount of coffee that they consumed. So that points to something that all brands can do, which is work hard to invest in good customer perceptions, good brand equity for their brand. So that's more than buying better coffee and making, you know, working on your roast and working on your extraction. Those things are all important, but also important is having people understand what your brand stands for, what your brand means, and how the brand itself is a commitment to quality. That's my feeling anyway. Anything to add on that, Heather?
No, I think you explained it well, and it's connecting that brand also to the consumer and making sure that you're knowing your consumer and being able to align your brand with what they want and need, and maybe even kind of going off what Morten was saying and kind of slowly with the familiarity, maybe even coffee tastings of, you know, this is what you normally get, but like try this, you know, from the normal customers, the loyal customers that come in, that kind of get the same thing. It's just slowly introducing a different taste to them, and just for free, here you go, taste it, and kind of guiding them in that direction too is another way.
Great. And in answer to Spencer's question, Morten just chatted to me that the consumers were asked, how well do you know the following coffee suppliers? So that's the way that question was dealt with. Okay, so this conversation is leading to this other great question from Michael Losada, which asks, how do you develop brand equity when quality and specialty are becoming more ubiquitous? Any thoughts on that, Morten? I've got some.
Yes, but that's more like from a consultancy perspective than a researcher perspective. Because that's what I it's probably bad English, but I'll call it the symbolic value, where you have you know, the technical aspect of the quality is all the, you know, the physical thing, the quality of the green, the quality of the roast profile, the quality of the extraction, and the final cup. So that's all the technical thing, and then the symbolic things is all the psychological thing, the cultural thing. And then really invest in that aspect of it, because that spills over on how it's perceived by the consumer. So really invest in the culture of the business. But I guess this is this is not new to to people, but that's you know, specialty coffee people, particularly here in Europe, are very, very focused on just, you know, I'm in this business to just create this amazing cup of coffee, and then everything will just all the other things will happen automatically, which isn't the case, and that's why you really need to spend time to develop the culture and the why of the tribe that you are starting when starting a company, and that's really important to invest time and attention on that as a business startup.
David Hazan asked kind of a similar question to this, getting more detailed, and maybe I'll point it to you, Heather. What do you think that the key factors that determine and define consumers' perception of a coffee brand? Logo, packaging, website, advertising, website, retail experience, social responsibility perception. I'll just note here that some of the SCA consumer research actually asked consumers to prioritize some of these things. So Heather, what are your impressions of that?
Yeah, we did ask to prioritize what factors they use to choose their coffees, and flavor was at the top. As far as other different ways of even marketing with websites, social media, it's just a matter of finding that niche in your area, in your city, in your town, something that sets you apart from everyone else, which could be very customizable to where you are and what you're doing. Yeah, and also with just this younger generation of consumers, being able to speak to them. There's been a lot of research on millennials in general, and just, you know, they go on Instagram after they're, you know, having their coffee or somewhere and taking pictures of the latte art, and, you know, it's word of mouth after that, and they have such a far reach just through social media channels. So really getting involved in that, in the social media of Instagram, of Twitter, and just getting your brand out there, and kind of knowing what people are talking about, knowing what they want. It seems that the younger consumers really want to connect with the coffee they want, that experience they want, something that matters to them, you know. And so kind of putting together your marketing kind of around that, I think would be good.
A lot of, you know, on this question, a lot of our research is pointed towards people want good feelings around their coffee, and some want specific things like, you know, the name of the farm or you know, details about the coffee. And that's true. It's important to some customers, but that group of customers seems to be a minority. The larger group of coffee consumers, and this of course will be familiar to all of us, want their coffee to be comfortable to them. So they don't want to be challenged too much. They want to know something about the coffee, but they use words like, you know, indulgence, treat, I want to love my coffee. And I think brands that really embrace that and respect a consumer's desire to be comfortable and familiar, and have that coffee being an indulgence, not a challenging thing, I think may have an advantage in branding. And then moving over time, we've been talking about this transition, this moving of a consumer from maybe from unconscious to conscious, or from being instinctive about their coffee to being thoughtful about their coffee. That's a process, and it requires trust building first. So you building a lot of trust elements into the brand, I think, is important. Here's a question from Joe Boot. How do you cope with regional bias, like urban versus countryside? That's an interesting question. Any thoughts about that?
So bias, or you mean differences?
I don't know. Is Job on audio? We can unmute you here for a second if you want to clarify that question. Let me get to you here. There you are, Job. Job, you're unmuted if you want to clarify that a little bit. Oh, looks like we lost Job there. So the way I perceive that question is it could be here's my interpretation of that question is that, you know, urban consumers may be attracted to sort of more urbane brands that talk about their urbanness, whereas the opposite might be true in other areas like rural areas. And I think that's true. We've seen the emergence now recently in the United States of brands that are explicit about not being about urban centers, but more about being middle American brands. And I think that's true. I think consumers look for brands that they feel resonant with their values and their needs. So.
Yeah, for sure. In Denmark, we have in the eastern part of the country, people tend to use buy Heinz tomato ketchup, and on the west, you know, in the western part of Denmark, it's Bouvet, a different brand. And just to add, this is a consumer study for sure. So the point is not that these data are something that we could extract to everybody. They are specific for the consumer group that was selected in this process. So it could be really interesting to do exactly the same study in different regions in the world or in a country, and then we'll kind of map out the differences. So this is not claimed to be universal data, but just, you know, data from a specific group of people at a specific time when this was recorded.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, Morten. It would be interesting to see if we duplicated this throughout different areas, how that would really be different based on regions or countries.
Okay, Stephen Lee asked, what do you feel is an appropriate timeline to drift or move quality forward from a familiar quality? So you mentioned, Morten, you mentioned timeline a little bit before, and
that's really interesting, because that is basically the design of a study. If you've seen my Rico speak, the very last slide points to a research design that we drafted as inspired by the research we've done, but we've never succeeded in funding that, because here we wanted to expose people. We would take a canteen, and then we would actively select. We were allowed by the owner to actually select 3 different sub groups of the employees, and we could trace their behavior on the card they used in the canteen to purchase, not credit card, but they had a employee card. And then we would make a lottery where some people would win 1 cup, some people would win 10, and somebody would win 20 of a high quality coffee that was introduced. And then we would expose them in a period of 2 weeks. And then we would have after 2 weeks, we would say, okay, this was an introduction of coffee that you can now purchase in the canteen. And then we would see how much the exposure to high quality would make people more likely to buy the high quality after 2 weeks of exposure. And this, the great thing about this is it's a perfect randomized prospective study design. So that could really be interesting, but we never succeeded to carry out the study, because this would, if we didn't find anything, we could try, okay, let's do it for, 4 weeks or something like that. Or if we found, strong results, it would be really good data to show to people in a coffee shop that you can actually serve people what they ask and just give them higher quality, or you could serve them the one with milk, and then you could serve them something that is really high quality without milk and tell them, don't add milk to this because this is, notice how you don't need it. And then people could think, if I do this, for 2 weeks, they'll actually shift, or some of them would shift. So this is something that could be really interesting to get some serious data on. We still have the design, but we just need the funding to carry it out.
Yeah, Morten, that sounds like a really interesting and would come up with a lot of great insights. And I can also speak to previous consumer research that we've done in terms of kind of transitioning a consumer over from the familiarity to the quality. We did in 2013 a qualitative consumer research, and it was more of a blog. We asked people to kind of blog their coffee journeys over the course of a week, in terms of their whole life, when they started drinking specialty coffee, how they started, and what was identified in that research that kind of took people from the familiarity to quality was a cue, which was time and effort. So it was when a consumer would show that they were interested, wanted to take a little bit more time and effort into looking at the menu, or getting to know, you would have to get to know the customer, but it was that time and effort cue that kind of like let you know, okay, they're ready to kind of transition to the next one. So that would be, oh, taste this coffee or something like that. But consumers were kind of showing that they suddenly became more interested in different options and more options of coffees, and that was kind of how it was identified of when they can transition over comfortably, rather than just kind of coming at them when they weren't really ready.
Let's see. Stephen Lee asks, do you feel that investing in demographics and targeting specifics within your marketplace is a good focus point?
Sorry, once again.
The question was about, do we think that investing in demographics, understanding in demographics of the local market for your coffee is a good starting point?
Yeah, again, since we are talking about brand equity or brand, which I would say is associated with the symbolic aspect of the coffee, it could be interesting to also take of psychographics, because demographics only, that's the hard data, but psychographics sometimes tells you more. And so you really need to understand not only these demographic data, but also a bit more about the personality types, and that's a slightly different area. It's not something I'm expert in at all, but it's just something I've heard about. They talk about when they at the Department of Consumer Science at Food Science that this is a big thing, that demographics is nice, but not enough to really understand the whys of why people buy a product, but also that's specifically related to the brand, what kind of thoughts and feeling that they is at the basis of their decision, and what kind of culture they feel they become part of when they purchase a product.
Morten, I was just asking, did Imane publish this work ever? Did this ever get published? And if not, I know that we have the manuscript. Is it okay for us to share it?
I would have to ask, Imane, but I'm sure, but we just need to speak with the author first. Right. It wasn't published. It wasn't published scientifically. Nobody, invested the time in doing that. But the format that is already published in SCA is obviously freely available, but the report itself, the PDF, we would have to ask Imane first if that's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, so let us know if anyone's interested in seeing that specific thing. Let us know, and we'll ask the author of the research. Because I asked that because there were some specifics about the methodologies. And I was thought about that because Isabella asked if she could help duplicating this research in Brazil. It would be interesting to her to see the results there, where specialty coffee is further as far as it can be from staple or commercial coffee. So she's saying that there's a bigger brand perception difference in Brazil than perhaps in Europe or the United States. I think that's an interesting point of view too.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see. Sean Elder says, from a pragmatic perspective, how applicable and valuable is this research to roasteries around the world who do, say, 90% commodity commercial coffees and say 10% specialty coffees? Do you think it could help them reach out to their customers better? If so, how?
I would say that you know, obviously the shift in, or the difference between you know, brand perception and also sensoric sensitivity to quality difference, that is different from place to place in the world. But I still think that the two main points here that this study show, even though this is only a particular place in Copenhagen, then at least it helps you to reach out if you are aware that you cannot just camp yourself in your cup of coffee. There's more to it than the technical aspect. Really, to take that point to heart, but also that, you know, if you are outside the horizon of familiarity of your consumers, you might end up, you know, giving them something that they do not like, even though as a coffee person, you know that this is better. So those 2 points, I do not, you know, regardless of the specific brand perception and the specific sensory sensitivity to quality in any part of the world, if you're just aware of those 2 points, you're really, you know, much better off compared to somebody who are just, you know, thinking high quality sells itself and it's all about the quality. You know, I don't need to talk nicely to the people. You know, there's a lot of arrogance around in the specialty coffee community and towards low quality customers. I think at least that's something I've seen, and that's I think that's an important point, that that's part of the consumer experience. If somebody is, you know, denying you to put milk in the coffee that the consumer just bought, without having a pleasant conversation of an alternative to adding milk, if they have a problem with their customers adding milk, you know, that you can go to that situation. You know, I would also, if I really took a lot of care creating a high quality cup of coffee, it would also hurt, you know, me too, that somebody adds milk. But that conversation can be had in many different ways, and the way the conversation is had is part of the brand. You know, do the consumer feel welcomed, or, you know, is it an interesting conversation, or is it a conversation where the consumer feels a bit inferior and a bit, you know, perhaps stupid? I've seen that in coffee shops. And I think this study shows that it's important to be aware of those aspects. So this was a bit conceptual rather than numbers, but I think that's the main way to apply this study, is this awareness in your consideration of your brand and your behavior towards your customers.
Great. Here's a question from Eli Aaronkranz, who asks, could you maybe explain a bit more about the subconscious measuring, and how drastic were the consumption differences, and how do you weigh that versus their expressed opinions? We've got this slide up here that shows some of these consumption differences. So For example, national brand number 2, you can see for the high quality coffee, the number was something like, looks like maybe 14 grams or so, and the number for high quality coffee was 20 grams or so. So that's the difference there. But maybe Morten, you could explain a little bit about the interpretation of that information.
Yeah, it's very important in decision neuroscience to have physiological measures and not only conscious measures. So nobody knew that the amount consumed was measured. This was completely subconscious. So it's subconscious in the sense that they are never told that it will be measured, and they never found out while they walked away. People say something, but they do something else. And also they were after the test, they were told that they'll get a cup of coffee as part of to thank them for the time they spent. And this was also a behavioral element. So it was not to be nice to people that they gave them a cup of coffee, but they could choose one of the 4 brands, which is interpreted as true preference. They wanted to walk away with one over the other 3, and that was measured. So it's very important in decision neuroscience to measure behavior and also ask about preference, and then see how the 2 things aligns. And this is really important. This is, decision neuroscience is so important in consumer science, because people might say a lot of things that you cannot use, because if they behave differently than they say, then you don't care what they say. You care about what they buy as a coffee professional. And so the hard evidence is what they actually end up buying, and not what they say. Because if we in our study at the train station just asked them, which one, taste these, which one do you think is the most expensive, and they pointed to that, and never told them, oh, by the way, you can walk away with one of these, then we would just have, and if we assume that they would also take away, if they were given a cup of coffee, they would also walk away with the highest quality or the most expensive coffee, then we would never have found out that they actually prefer to walk away with the low quality. So that's really important in decision neuroscience, and from a commercial aspect, that you actually measure behavior and not just ask. So that's a fundamental aspect of decision neuroscience, to measure behavior and not only ask questions. I hope that was an answer that was useful.
Great. Here's we're coming to the end of our hour, but here's a final comment from Liza Maximova from Portugal. She says, hello everybody, thank you for sharing the results of the experiment. I'm working in a specialty coffee shop in Portugal where the comfort zone in terms of coffee is over roasted Robusta, sold as low as 70 cents a cup. The majority of my customers are tourists. The situation here is that it seems like locals really like the commodity low quality coffee they're drinking for many reasons, taste and price. They're constantly consciously choosing it over specialty coffee. Quality is not selling itself. I can see it every day. So I can see that that's the challenge that that we have to face. Hopefully research like this helps uncover some of the details around the challenges we face and the opportunities that we have in specialty coffee. So as I mentioned at the top, this is we see this as only the first of a sharing of a bunch of different, lot of different pieces of research that we have. I've put my email and Heather's email in our in the chat window here, so please stay in touch with us if you have any further questions or looking for any more information. I'd love to, for everyone that's an SCA member, I'd really invite you to explore the research part of the Specialty Coffee Association website, which is www.sca.coffee, and there is a lot of resources. It can bring you to a page called Member Assets, which if you're a member, you're entitled to a password to. That'll lead you to articles on this research, other research summaries, infographics, tools, etc. So I really encourage you to explore that. Let's see. Oh yeah, Heather put the. Hold on, I'm going to share the.
Yeah, this is the article on this specific study. It's like an executive summary that will give in more detail, kind of just going over the study, and it shows what we've talked about, but it's a little bit more detail for everyone on the SCA News website as well.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it, and stay in touch, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.